What's up everybody, I'm Jesse from Welding the Maker, and today we're going to build a couple of nightstands. Now in case you missed my last video, I made a hickory bed with a secret storage drawer underneath, and those were to hide a couple dog beds for us so we can just pull them out. Dogs can sleep in the drawer, and then in the morning we just kick the drawer basically closed underneath the bed. You'd never know they were there. Now I'm making a couple nightstands to match that hickory bed, so these will be hickory nightstands with some metal legs. Now if you have any questions, make sure you shoot them down below in the comment section. If you don't have any questions, how about you roast this horrible mustache? Do that, and the best comment I'll pin to the top so everybody can see how bad you roasted me. I have full detailed PDF plans on my website, so make sure you check the link below and check those out. Now let's get into the build. I'm gonna start the project out by milling out the hickory legs. Now these legs aren't actually legs, they don't go down to the bottom, but I'm gonna call them legs through this process just because it's easier to distinguish between the panels and the corners, which would be the legs. Now I'm using 8/4 inch hickory for these, and I milled them out so that they were perfectly square. Now these are about 18.5 inches long at final dimension. Now if you want the detailed sizing, make sure you check out the plans on my website. So after the legs are done and cut to size, it's time to move on to the panels. Now for the panels, I'm using 3/4 inch thick plywood. This is really just an MDF with a hickory veneer, but you can use any sort of 3/4 inch plywood for this build. So I'm gonna start by using my circular saw to cut down the plywood into certain sections, and then I run it through my table saw to get the exact dimensions for each panel. Once those panels are cut to proper size, it's time to move over to my pocket hole jig and put 4 pocket holes in each side. Now 4 pocket holes plus some wood glue is going to make a really sturdy joint, and that's all you're going to need for each panel. Now once all the pocket holes are drilled out, it's time to assemble. Now I'm using Titebond and some Power Pro pocket hole screws for this project, and each joint is going to have that, and it's going to be a really strong joint using those. I first assembled the small panels to the legs, and then I moved on to the back panel. The back panel is also going to be that 3/4 inch, and I'm going to attach both sides to that long panel. Once that's done, it's time to move on to the bottom. I actually used a 3/4 inch bottom and slid that into place and screwed it on each side, which made the entire box really sturdy. Next, I cut a small 3-inch piece that was the exact same length as the back and attach it to the front. You won't be seeing this at all, but it's gonna keep the front from bowing out at all, and it's gonna keep it completely sturdy. Next, it's time to get the top ready. I just used the same sort of hickory. I could have glued up some panels with some actual hickory hardwood, but decided just to use this plywood as well, since I already had it on hand and it was easier to do. Now, one thing I had to do was make some veneer or some edge banding for the sides. Since it's just MDF or since it's ply, you have to edge band it to make it look, you know, finished. Well, hickory edge banding is kind of hard to buy, so I decided to make it myself. Basically, I just cut strips from hickory hardwood as thin as I could, and then they were usually around a 1/16 of an inch thick, and I went through and glued it on. First, I used some tight bond with some bandy clamps from Rockler, and then I ended up using actually some Star Bond. The Star Bond ended up drying a lot faster, and it just ended up working a lot better. The tight bond was just taking so long to dry that it would have taken me a week just to get each piece or the entire two tops together. Once they were dried and glued on, it's time to sand them down. Now they have a little bit of an edge. Luckily the hickory that I had that I used was just a little bit bigger, and so I just sanded it completely down so it was completely flush. After that, I went through and added a little bit of glue to each edge and sanded that edge as well, and it ended up filling up any other gap with some sawdust and just filling it in really nice, so there was zero gap. Now, if you're using birch or oak or anything like that for the plywood, it's really easy just to buy some stick-on edge banding or iron-on edge banding, because they're more easily to get or access compared to hickory. Hickory's a lot harder. Like I couldn't even find one online that was less than 250 feet, which I definitely didn't need that size. Now, I did a light sanding throughout the entire thing. Obviously, with it being plywood, you got to be careful not to sand through anything, so it's just a light sanding to get it to about 120, and then I used Armor Seal by General Finishes to finish the entire thing. Once the finish was all dried and ready to go, I attached the top to the base. Now that the case is completely finished and the main part of the end tables are done, I needed some metal legs. Now you can just buy them online, Amazon, or there's a bunch of places online that you could buy some metal legs, but I have a welder and I wanted to try welding, my hand at welding. Now I'm new to welding, but I decided to try it and really go through the process of learning how to do some metal legs, since I'm going to be doing a lot of those since I do a lot of furniture. So I'm not going to go into detail on how I actually did each step of the legs. I'm going to have a separate video on this later on, so make sure you check that out. I attached that leg to the base and moved the base upstairs into the room. Now it's time to start working on the drawers. I had a bunch of excess plywood from a couple other projects, plus the project that I'm working on with that hickory plywood. So I used that for most of the drawer base. Once the pieces were cut, it's time to use my pocket hole jig once again, put some pocket holes in the sides, and then screw them to each piece. Now for the bottom, I used a 1/2 inch plywood, and I also decided to take it over to my Rockler router sled and actually route out 3/4 of an inch around each side so that it fits in snug. And then I'm gonna shoot it in with some brad nails, but also glue it as well. Now this rabbet joint's gonna give a ton more structural integrity, make sure that it doesn't move around, but also fit in snug and make it look really nice. Once the bottom's secure, I attach the glides, threw them into the drawers, and it's time to make the faces. Now for the drawer faces, I used hickory once again. This is gonna be 4/4 inch hickory. I milled it down to about 3/4 of an inch. I picked out the best pieces. I had to glue up them as panels, and then it's time to cut them into size, sand it, finish it, and it's good to go. Now when it comes to attaching the drawer faces to the drawers, I used playing cards to actually make sure each side is perfectly square. You don't want to just eyeball it and then end up being closer on one side than the other, and it's just going to be not good. So I lined it up with the bottom, used playing cards on each side, make sure they were even, and have been able to keep it snug. I clamped it in place, then on the back side I attached it with 6 screws. Now for the top one, it's a little more tricky, right? So you don't have space to actually just go in there and clamp once it's in place. It's snug in there, you can't clamp it anyway. So what I used was some Star Bond CA glue with accelerator so it dries really fast. So I just put a bunch of glue on the drawer, put the face on there, let it dry for a minute, gently pull it out, then clamp it in place. Then once it's clamped, attach it with 6 screws. Then I put on the drawer hardware and it was good to go. And that's pretty much it. That's a wrap. I love the way these look. They're really simple. If this is something that's new to you, you can just buy a couple sheets of plywood from Home Depot and you're pretty much good to go. If you have a pocket hole jig, a circular saw, and a drill, you could really build these. Now this is a relatively simple build, and it's something that if you've been in woodworking but you haven't dabbled in anything a little bit more complex, this is something that may be perfect for you. So check out the plans on my website. Let me know what you guys think of the end result. Leave a comment. If you haven't roasted my mustache, make sure you go do that. And make sure you subscribe and follow me on Instagram as well. Thanks for watching, guys. Check out my other videos. I'll see you guys next time.